Hi, I'm Maribel Lopez, and I'm back to talk to you today a little bit about some of the stuff that happened with NVIDIA last week. I want to talk about something specific that happened at the GTC conference that I thought was interesting because everyone I know is talking about OpenClaw. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll explain it in a second. But I want to start with OpenClaw because it became one of the fastest growing open source projects in the history of software. Really, enterprise IT teams had mostly been watching this from the sidelines, trying to figure out what it means for them, not because they didn't think it was interesting, not because their employees weren't already using it. The employees were. The reason that enterprises held back is the same reason they've been holding back on agentic AI in general. We've got some serious concerns around security, governance, and the real possibility that an autonomous agent could be doing something it shouldn't inside your corporate network. So NVIDIA announced something it called NemoClaw, and that's designed to address some of the exact problems. I want to walk you through what it is, why it matters, because I always try to look at sort of what's going on between the hype versus the reality. So what is OpenClaw and why enterprises have not really been aggressively embracing it? Let me start with a quick definition of OpenClaw because everywhere there's different explanations, they're often missing. One of the best examples right now we have of an agentic AI system. And what that means in plain language, it's software that sits on your computer. It connects to large language models. It can take action on your behalf, not just answer questions, but take action. And it can look at what's on your screen, control your browser, open files, execute commands, log into websites. That's if you give it access. It operates your computer the way you would. And that can be extremely powerful. There's a lot of things that you'd love to just have automatically happen, right? So let's think about that from an enterprise perspective for a minute. If an employee installs OpenClaw on a work laptop and gives it permission to operate the machine, it potentially has access to everything the employee has access to within the organization. So think corporate email, CRM data, financial systems, customer records. And here's the part that makes CIOs pause. It can communicate externally. It can send data out of your network. So at NVIDIA GTC, Jensen Huang laid out the problem accurately when he said, agentic systems in a corporate network have access to sensitive information. They can execute code, communicate externally. You could access employee information, access supply chain, access finance information, and send it out. So obviously that can't possibly be allowed, is what he said. Right. Okay. That's why enterprises were trying to watch this from the sidelines. And even Silicon Valley tech companies are worried about this. Meta told employees not to use it on work machines. Other companies followed suit. But here's the thing about prohibition. It rarely works when the tool is generally useful. Employees still did anyway, which means the risk existed whether or not IT knew about it. And there have been some safeguards that you can get around to kind of prevent this style of shadow IT and permissioning. But that's exactly the pattern that we're worried about. The same pattern we saw with mobility. In every major productivity tool going back to like Dropbox and then Slack, and here we are again with agentic AI and OpenClaw. So what is NemoClaw? What did NVIDIA announce? It's not a product that you can buy. It's a reference stack, an open source configuration of tools that installs on top of OpenClaw and adds an enterprise infrastructure layer that was missing. So 3 components possibly worth understanding. The first is OpenShell. It's the core security piece. It runs OpenClaw inside of an isolated sandbox, and it limits what files the agent can access, restricts network connectivity, and lets enterprise IT teams write policy rules that define exactly what agents are allowed to do or not do. You can specify which systems it can reach, what data it can process, and which actions require a human to approve. So some of those rules can be changed on the fly without restarting the agent, which is actually useful for enterprise environments that need to maybe adjust policies quickly. The second is a privacy router. When agents need to call cloud-based AI models, and they often will, the privacy router sits between the agent and the external model and prevents that sensitive enterprise data from being transmitted out. This is the piece that make some of that hybrid local cloud architecture viable for regulated industries. So that's been interesting. The third is the NVIDIA's Nemotron model family, which can run locally on your NVIDIA hardware. Running inference locally keeps your data on premise. It also reduces some of the cloud inference costs. We've been talking a lot about that in different customers about how do we balance those two things. So NVIDIA says their hybrid approach can cut query costs by more than 50%. can't validate that, but it's a statement out there for what it's worth. I've been speaking with many enterprise buyers, and this hybrid model that companies like Dell, Lenovo, HP, and NVIDIA pitch is actually really resonating. So all of this installs with a single command. And I want to emphasize that because configuration complexity is one of the real barriers to enterprise AI deployment. A stack that takes days of professional services to configure doesn't get deployed broadly. Single command installation can really matter in a case like this. So the next thing I want to pick up on is the SaaS, say that fast 3 times, ecosystem piece, and what's important about that story. Here's a part of the announcement that I think deserves a lot of attention. NVIDIA just didn't announce NemoClaw. They shared that a significant portion of enterprise SaaS vendors are building on top of this NVIDIA Agent Toolkit, which is a collection of models, runtimes, and libraries for building, securing, and optimizing autonomous, long-running multi-agent systems. It provides developers with tools to create reasoning agents that can safely use code, tools, and data. So big names, lots of big names were in the release. We had Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Atlassian, Box, Red Hat, Adobe, we could keep going on. There were a lot of people there. And there were actually, all those vendors were at GTC, all talking about how they've been partnering with NVIDIA. So these technically are not experimental partners. These are applications that run your enterprise operations. So to maybe give a few specifics, Salesforce is integrating Agent Toolkit into Agentforce, their agentic platform for service sales and marketing, and using Slack as the orchestration layer. If you're already in Salesforce and Slack, which many enterprises are, this is not going to be a greenfield deployment for you. You're extending something you already have. ServiceNow is building their autonomous workforce of AI specialists on Agent Toolkit. ServiceNow, large enterprises are using to manage their IT operations. And we're seeing agentic AI is now moving into ITSM workflows through the vendors you already trust. CrowdStrike embedded Falcon protection directly into NVIDIA AI agent architectures. If you're running CrowdStrike for endpoint security, you have a path to extend that same protection to your AI agents. And, the reason I think these partnerships are starting to matter is we're trying to get to this level of interoperability. There's a lot of roll your own agentic stuff for each and every single application provider, and we're trying to move towards platforming that so that it can be more consistent and secure across the different platforms. And it's one of the biggest concerns I hear from CIOs right now about agentic AI or AI agents is like, okay, they can work inside one application. What happens when I need to work across applications, when we're looking at multi-agent orchestration, when we're looking at identities for these agents? So if you have companies like Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP all signed up to support the NVIDIA stack, it doesn't solve this problem completely. Of course it doesn't. But it absolutely can help reduce some of the workload that you're looking at for trying to figure out how do I make these things work. So that is actually something that I think is valuable. So far, I sound like I'm really enthusiastic about it. And I am actually, because anything that helps secure something like OpenClaw that's really very engaging and so popular, we need to get behind and try to make this work for us. But there are obviously some caveats, right? So where do you pump the brakes, right? Local hardware dependency. To run Nemotron models locally, the option that keeps your data fully on premises, you need the NVIDIA GPU hardware, the RTX PC, the DGX Spark, or the DGX station. Actually, I spoke to one of my analyst friends who's at NVIDIA, and I asked him if he went to do and play with the OpenClaw, and he's like, "Yeah, I brought my own DGX Spark with me." So I'm trying to imagine me traveling around with my DGX Spark, but I could do it. So at any rate, right? If your enterprise runs on AMD, Intel, ARM, people have a mixture of infrastructures, but I just wanted to lay it out there that if you don't have NVIDIA hardware in your organization, then you're looking at being back on the cloud stack. So it works, but it partially undermines that privacy story that we were talking about and that NVIDIA was leading with. OpenShell uses YAML for policy configuration. Nothing wrong with YAML. It's very developer friendly. It's not necessarily enterprise admin friendly. So a large organization managing hundreds of agents across multiple business units is going to need tooling and dedicated staff to manage that policy layer. It's not point and click governance, but this is where we are in the market right now. We're moving so fast. So I love where we're going, but it doesn't mean that you get like this nice little, put this in and there's an easy button, right? So that's not a deal breaker, but it's a resource conversation that you need to have before you start. And then third, and this one is important, the partner ecosystem is announced, but none of this stuff is really fully proven yet in my mind. So when I see a list of, say, 15 SaaS companies working with NVIDIA, I read that as intent and roadmap, not necessarily we got it all the way locked down with certified integrations that are shipping today. Now, it could be, but I haven't tested all these, so I just want to be honest and transparent about that. So before you make any deployment decisions based on a specific partner integration, ask that vendor what's actually shipping, when and what enterprises have been testing it or completed it. Are they like you? Are they not like you? Do they have similar concerns around privacy, security, regulation, whatever that is? So don't assume that working with means ready to deploy. I know you guys are all bright and don't, but I felt compelled to say it because it was important to say. So NemoClaw addresses OpenClaw specifically. It does not solve your broader multi-vendor, multi-agent orchestration problem across your entire suite of technology. So if you want agents from different vendors to collaborate in a specific workflow, which I think is where the real value lives and what we're moving towards as a group, an industry group, to try to make that happen on the tech side. But there's still work ahead of you. The governance frameworks for multi-agent systems across vendors are nascent. We're having a lot of debate about how do you actually secure an agent? Is it the same as how you would secure a human? I don't think it is, but I've actually heard extensions of existing products that make it sound like that'll be okay. I've also started to talk to some startups that are looking at changing that paradigm as well. So it could be that there's, a lot more we need to do in the security stack to make that happen. So the tools are improving faster than most organization readiness is happening right now. And I'll add one more thing that isn't NVIDIA's problem to solve, but it's your problem to solve. And this gets back to the identity frameworks were designed for people, not agents. So before you deploy the agents at scale, you need to confirm that your identity infrastructure can assign, manage, revoke agent credentials separately from what you do with human credentials. And this has to happen fast, people. These agents are often running and doing things at machine speed. So if something goes wrong, you got to be able to pump the brakes right away and say, okay, you're done. You're off as an agent, right? So that's the thing that I really worry about. How long before you figure out it's a problem and how quickly can you shut it down and can you roll it back if it did something or did it delete all your servers? This stuff happens, folks. It happens. So be careful. Be very careful. Not saying be afraid. I'm saying be careful. There's a difference. The guardrails. It doesn't necessarily give you identity management or all the other things we just talked about in sort of a multi-agent, multi-app, multi-everything world. I'm really excited to see somebody addressing the problem, and I think it was really necessary for enterprise IT buyers. So where I land, it was a genuine step forward. It addresses the right problem. It's adding enterprise security controls to an open source agent platform that employees are probably already adopting. The installation seems like it would be simple and remove a barrier. I don't know how simple it is yet. I didn't get to test that, but I'm optimistic. And all these things are simple in a relative term, right? So when Maribel from Lopez Research tries to install it, I'm sure I'm not going to find it simple, right? But when you, with your specialized IT teams, go out and install it, you may in fact find it to be easy. So personally, I didn't find installing OpenClaw to be like the easiest thing on the planet. So that's just my personal perspective, but I'm working on it. This is a journey for all of us and we're all trying really hard. So I really appreciate the pain. Don't get me wrong. I really do. It's not easy. Nothing we do is easy, but it can be so valuable. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the SaaS ecosystem around NVIDIA. That's actually really great for everyone. It matters for the enterprises that use those products. So with that, I think I'm going to close out this podcast. I want to come back to you hopefully this week, maybe by the end of the week. And I want to talk about a discussion with Yum Brands at NVIDIA GTC that was really powerful and has started to change some of my thinking on AI use cases and other things. But that's for another day. Thank you for listening. I hope that you will subscribe on one of the various channels. I'm posting these on YouTube now. I'm going to actually post them in the YouTube channel. I was streaming them, but apparently that puts them in a totally different place. They'll be here on LinkedIn. They'll be in X. I guess I'm trying to be everywhere. Who isn't? But it's the modern world. I hope that you find these helpful. I would love any comments that you have, good or bad. I know that I've obviously forgotten some things, but once again, thanks for being here and always appreciate your support. And there's a lot of exciting things going on in technology, and I hope to bring you more info about how that's happening. Cheers, everybody. Bye.